Many assaults on the environment happen slowly and continually, almost invisibly to us. Starting a car engine, buying meat at the grocery store, throwing away a plastic straw. Mountaintop removal is different. It is sudden and violent and intentionally, unmistakably destructive. Coal companies will blow off the tops of mountains with explosives in order to more easily and cheaply access the coal seams underneath vast swaths of forest, streams, and wildlife habitat. They destroy massive areas of wild land to produce a dirty energy that heavily pollutes the atmosphere with greenhouse gases. Their use of explosives also allows them to employ many fewer miners. Mountaintop removal was one of the big environmental stories in the media in the last couple decades. There were massive protests and a lot of bad press for the coal companies. Now, coal production is down in the US, and dramatic and shocking stories about mountaintop removal have largely disappeared from the headlines. But mountaintop removal has not gone away. As the easier-to-access coal is mined, the amount of land that must be destroyed by mountaintop removal to produce the same amount of coal has increased. Vernon Haltom and Junior Walk haven't forgotten what's happening in West Virginia and Appalachia because they live it every day. They both work for Coal River Mountain Watch, the organization previously directed by Judy Bonds, the renowned mountaintop removal activist from West Virginia, who was the daughter of a coal miner and died of cancer in 2011 at age 58. Vernon and Junior's stories are urgent environmental ones, but they're also stories about the media and how we forget and move on. I'm John Fiege, and this episode of Chrysalis is part of the Chrysalis Project series. Here are Vernon Haltom and Junior Walk. I was hoping that you all could start by telling me a bit about your backgrounds and how you both came to work for Coal River Mountain Watch.
My background is I was raised in Oklahoma, went to Oklahoma State University, went into the Air Force, went back into education, got my English teaching degree, and taught English for a while in high school, taught English as a second language. Just before I moved to West Virginia, I started learning about mountaintop removal. And while I was there, I saw it in person, and I met Judy Bonds and began volunteering with Coal River Mountain Watch in 2004. Came on staff at the beginning of 2005, and I've been there since. When I heard Judy Bonds on the radio in 2003, she was the Goldman Environmental Prize winner at the time. And she was so inspirational and so motivational that, seeing the problem of mountaintop removal and seeing what the coal companies were doing to the communities was unbearable.
And how about you, Junior?
Yeah, so I graduated high school in 2008. Shortly before I graduated, I realized that in this country you kind of need money to go to college. And so I realized I wasn't really going to be able to do that. And so I was stuck here in southern West Virginia. And like many people who are in that kind of situation, I went to work for the coal industry. At 17 years old, I went to work for the Elk Run Coal Processing Plant in Sylvester, West Virginia. I worked there for about 6 months as I graduated high school, and quickly learned that that's not something I wanted to do with the rest of my life. It's dangerous work. It's difficult work, and it doesn't pay enough. And so did some minimum wage work for a while. Dollar store, Dairy Queen, that sort of thing. And eventually, I was offered a position as a security guard on a surface mine. And I figured, sitting on my butt for 12 hours a day making money, I could handle that. And so I did that. I did that also for about 6 months. But within the first couple weeks of me working up there, I felt miserable about it. Sitting up there watching that machinery work and then, tearing down the mountains, and knowing that the people who lived below that mine site were going through the same stuff I went through when I was a kid, contaminated water, dust, coal trucks rumbling by your house, trains. I felt bad about putting other people through that, continuing that cycle of exploitation.
When you were a kid, how aware were you of that as a problem versus just like your reality that you didn't question?
Well, I mean, we had well water at my house when I was growing up. And they were doing coal slurry injection on the hillside above my family's home. And so coal slurry is a byproduct of coal processing. So when coal is mined, regardless if it's taken from an underground mine or a surface mine, the first stop for that coal is a processing plant. And that's where it's put through a series of chemical washes to be suitable to burn in a power plant to fit within Clean Air Act regulations. And the byproduct of that is that coal slurry. So that's everything in the coal that they're not allowed to burn and put into the atmosphere, as well as all the chemical agents that are used to take those impurities out. And they dispose of that in a few different ways, but one such way is by injecting it into old abandoned underground coal mines. And that's what they were doing right above my family's home. And so our water came out of my tap red for years. And I always knew that had something to do with the coal industry. In addition to that, through my entire elementary school career, I attended Marsh Fork Elementary, which at the time was situated directly next to a coal processing plant and a coal slurry impoundment, which is the other way that the industry disposes of this coal waste. They put it into these huge earthen dams. So when you think about a dam, you're usually thinking about concrete and steel, and that sort of thing, like the Hoover Dam. But when you're talking about a dam, as in a slurry impoundment, you're talking about a bunch of dirt and rubble and trees that are dumped into the face of a valley, used to like create a giant berm up to the top of the hilltop almost. And that whole holler back in behind there is backfilled with liquid waste. And so that was right directly next to my elementary school.
Mm. Wow. And that was one of the projects that you all did in terms of relocating that elementary school.
It was, yeah.
Were you part of that project?
Yeah, so essentially, while I was a security guard up there, I, decided to come and have a conversation with Judy, who I'd known ever since I was a little kid. I went to school with her grandson, and I think she also worked with my grandma at various times at like gas stations and stuff. But from there, I started volunteering with Coal River Mountain Watch while I was a security guard. And a few months down the road, I was offered a position on staff. And I started on staff at Coal River Mountain Watch in January of 2010. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Well, could each of you also describe the mountains and forests and waterways and biodiversity in Raleigh County and in the area around Coal River Mountain?
The topography is large valleys with a bunch of smaller valleys jutting off from it, which are known as hollers. And then each of those little hollers have hollers branching off from it, just going way back into the mountain and up to the tops. And, it's just, it can feel very isolated here because it takes so long to get to anywhere else. Like if you think about it, if you're up in the head of a holler that's in a holler, then you've got to travel out of two hollers before you even hit the main road. In a lot of places around here, it's like an hour to your closest McDonald's or Walmart or any of that stuff.
And what are some of your memories from childhood of being within that?
Going hunting, with my dad and my uncle, my pawpaw, traveling way back into the woods, either in trucks, and then later on kind of four-wheelers caught on and we take those. And yeah, just like being in the forest and being taught how to bring food back out. Why it's important for us to take care of these places where you can do those sorts of things.
Right. Well, as the production of coal has been plummeting in the United States over the last few years, it's easy to think of American coal mining and mountaintop removal as kind of vestiges of the past, but they're not. Can you all describe what mountaintop removal is what it's like to witness it, and what's going on right now with coal mining in Raleigh County and in the surrounding areas?
Mountaintop removal is still going on. It's still expanding. They don't stop. Um, there are new permits. The Turkey Foot permit it's well over 1,000 acres. I want to say 1,700 acres on Coal River Mountain was approved last year. The valley fill permits for that will bury over 3 miles of streams. And that's just part of the overall 12 square mile complex on Coal River Mountain. That includes the 8 billion gallon Brushy Fork sludge dam. So, the myth that it's over is just that myth. And that's one of the biggest obstacles to our work, because it's hard to get somebody to listen about your cause if they think that your cause is over.
Right.
In our backyard is Cherry Pond Mountain. The Twilight Complex there is 12 square miles, and the coal company operating there, they have 81 civil penalty delinquency letters since December 14th. And they're still allowed to operate. They're still getting permits renewed.
Yeah, I think that's one of the dirty secrets of our environmental regulations in this country is industry is constantly violating those regulations and often being even fined for it, if not warned about it. But they keep operating because the money they're making is so much greater than the costs of dealing with those kind of petty violations.
One of the permits that was recently renewed, it was actually signed on April 1st, April Fool's Day, the day after the company received a civil penalty delinquency letter. And the same company also had received a show cause notice just before that. I mean, it was something that we had requested because they had so many violations within the previous year. But the corrective action is what's called a consent order, where the company agrees to comply with the regulations and laws. And but there's no teeth involved. I mean, they tell them they have to have 3 consecutive days of no coal removal. And they're just going to schedule that in. It's not going to be punitive.
Right. And then there are no consequences. It's just like the threat is, we might be mad at you.
No consequences. I mean, sometimes the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection will wag their finger. On rare occasions, they will slap a wrist. But usually it's just a scowl.
Right. And if you compare it to the daily profits, it's just nothing.
And one thing that I think it's important to, I always say that mountaintop removal is the cradle of the climate crisis. So many people think that this is just a local problem, but it's not just a local problem. I mean, the coal that's extracted from the mountains becomes CO2 and contributes to global heating. The trees, the forests that are destroyed, and it's not just the trees, it's everything in the forest is demolished. So there's no longer a carbon sink there. And the blasting dust that goes into the communities, and Junior has a drone video of a blasting cloud coming from Coal River Mountain, drifting down through the communities of McDowell Branch and Workman's Creek, at least 2 miles. And that is deadly. I mean, those health consequences that have killed so many of our friends continue unabated. The West Virginia DEP will not issue a violation for fugitive dust. They just never do. That is what, the main culprit in over 30 health studies now that have been done. It's increasingly apparent that breathing this ultrafine silica, that's like very, very fine glass that goes right through your cell membranes, is not good for you. It causes cancer and heart disease and birth defects. And So, we've lost Judy Bonds to cancer. We've lost Joanne Webb to cancer. We've lost Larry Gibson to heart disease. We lost Chuck Nelson to heart disease. We lost Carol Judy to cancer. We lost Vicki Terry to cancer.
Yeah. And Junior, can you talk about, having grown up in those forests and on those rivers, like what is it like for you on an emotional and a visceral level to witness the mountaintop removal and these other side effects of it?
We've lost a lot of friends in the course of fighting against this stuff, and seeing some of these places that I've grown up digging ginseng and hunting and riding four wheelers and hiking. Seeing some of these places go from these lush, almost tropical type of forests up on top of these mountains where you're never going to run into another human being into just a bare rock face, just a vast moonscape. It's like losing a friend.
Yeah. I think one thing that's difficult for a lot of Americans to recognize is that close connection to the land, because so many people in our country have lost that close connection to the land.
I mean, can you blame them? Look at the land that they're given. You know what I mean? Most people looks out their window and they see, a big old 4-lane with stoplights and billboards and, gas station signs and all that mess. And, it's hard to feel a connection to that. I'm lucky for where I come up at,
Right.
you know.
Right. Lucky on the one hand, and then feeling the pain of watching it be destroyed on the other. And can you all catalog for me the impacts on ecosystems, on water and air quality, on flood risk, on human health of mountaintop removal and other coal production in that area?
When I first moved to West Virginia in 2001, the place was flooding. Some of the communities lost several homes, and most of that was in areas near mountaintop removal. Now there are more valley fills and more mountaintop removal coming. So the flood impacts is one of the first things that propelled the formation of Coal River Mountain Watch. So many people concerned about their homes from flooding in 1998 that killed 2 people in Artie, West Virginia. So, that's one of the first concerns. Then you have the blasting, which emits the ultrafine silica dust and other pollutants as well into the lungs of children and elderly and everybody in between in the communities. And blasting also cracks foundations, cracks walls. If you're prone to PTSD and hear these massive explosions every day, that's not helpful for your mental health. The health impacts from mountaintop removal are deadly. So there's that. There's water pollution. The valley fills that are created continue to pollute the water for decades. I mean, we don't know yet how long, because the earliest valley fills are still polluting after 30 years or so.
Can you describe what a valley fill is and how it's done and why it's done?
Okay, thank you, because a lot of people get this wrong. So when you take the top off the mountain, okay, you use a lot of explosives and you break the rock up and then you bulldoze it out of the way to get to the coal. Well, that rock and rubble has to go somewhere. So what the coal companies do is they dump it into the creeks and streams and hollows that are the natural contours of the mountains. And they compress it, they pack it down. And some of them are miles long, and the miles of streams, over 2,000 miles of streams have been impacted by valley fills. And
Like covered up and they're gone.
they're gone, they're buried. They're completely buried. They're hundreds of feet under this rubble. And so, so that contributes to the flooding, but you also have that contributing to pollution in the water, because all this rock that was segregated from the rain and the sun and the wind for millions of years is now broken up into smaller chunks. If you imagine, grinding your coffee and putting it in a basket to make coffee, that's a similar process. And then so the rain leaches through that, and the various minerals and pollutants that were locked up in the rock for all those millennia are now seeping back into the streams. And that, we don't know how long that will last, but considering the vast scale of these, it'll be forever. I mean, you have sediment ponds at the toe of these valley fills where the treatment is done, and that has to be done forever. And, we've seen coal companies go bankrupt, or those obligations not being taken care of otherwise. The coal companies aren't going to be there forever. When they stop doing that, it's still going to be polluting the streams. So, we've lost a large fraction of the species of fish in a lot of the streams, and a large fraction of the numbers of fish too, at least a third. So, that is a huge impact.
The forest itself in the valley is covered in this rubble as well, right?
It is.
So you have a functioning forest ecosystem in addition to the stream ecosystem that are both completely covered with dirt and destroyed.
They're all interrelated. The leaves that fall from the trees are, processed by the bugs in the streams, and those bugs feed the fish, and some of the fish and bugs are eaten by birds, and it's a whole system of overlapping cycles that is part of the beauty of the Appalachian forests.
Well, and the rest of the country often views folks in West Virginia, and especially folks from coal mining towns and coal mining families, as being diehard coal supporters and extremely anti-environmental. And the industries and politicians who profit tremendously from coal production love to use the West Virginia coal miner as this symbol of American freedom and hard work and that type of thing. The view from the ground is always much more complicated. Can you all talk a bit about the communities in Raleigh County and the views of folks there toward coal mining and mountaintop removal, and these coal companies like Massey Energy that profit so handsomely from this exploitation and destruction?
Really quick, just let me point out part of the myth that everybody is for mountaintop removal. I mean, consistently, the polls and surveys show that people in West Virginia and elsewhere in Appalachia oppose mountaintop removal 2-1. That's not insignificant. And the idea that everybody in West Virginia works for the coal industry is also a myth. Less than 3% of West Virginia's workforce works for the coal industry. Less than half of 1% works in mountaintop removal. But the rest of it, some of that's clustered in specific places. There are a lot more teachers than there are coal miners in West Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, things are always a lot more complicated than they initially seem from the national headlines, at least in most cases. And definitely there isn't like a homogenous view that everybody in southern West Virginia shares about the coal industry. Opinions and political beliefs and everything else is, just as diverse down in here as they are anywhere else. I mean, you've got people who are, diehard coal industry supporters that, whether they work in the industry or somebody in their family does or not, they're still going to believe whatever the right-wing news media shoves down their throat about, the coal industry and all that. But then you also have a lot of people who don't feel that way about it. The vast majority of people around here are apathetic about the coal industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because whether that apathy stems from, just not thinking about it that much, or whether that apathy stems from, a defeatist attitude of, the coal industry, that's the people who have the money and the power and they're going to do whatever they want. That's probably different on a person by person basis. But then you also do have a segment of the population here who are vehemently against stripping the land, even if they think that the economic benefits of the coal industry and of the past, underground mining and stuff like that have been worth it. They'll still draw the line at mountaintop removal or surface mining.
So one thing I see over and over again and all across the country, different industries, is this argument that industry tries to make that the people in the communities where these polluting and destructive activities happen, they want that to go on. They want those jobs. They want the economic activity. They're supportive. The people who are against it are outside agitators or urban environmentalists or professional activists. All these terms you hear thrown around. And I was just wondering if you all could talk about that a little bit in this kind of image that industry often tries to paint of the division between people from the community who are supportive and people from outside the community who are in opposition.
For sure. I mean, and I'll say that around here, the vast majority of the good paying coal mining jobs do not go to people who live directly around those coal mines. These people drive in an hour down into here to work, and when they get done, working, they get to go back home and turn on their tap water and it comes out clean. They get to send their kids to school somewhere that ain't in danger from being too close to coal operations. They get to drive on roads in their little cul-de-sacs and middle-class subdivisions and not have to be worried about getting flattened like a pancake by a coal truck. Those are the people who benefit from the coal industry. It ain't the people who lives in the trailer park right below the big strip mine who are now dealing with a bunch of runoff water and a bunch of dust and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and those kind of micro differences of different communities is completely lost in the national conversation about these things, I think.
Absolutely.
One of the things in West Virginia is you have so much of the industry propaganda infiltrating the schools even. On Earth Day, Alpha Metallurgical Resources hosted kids from Clear Fork Elementary School onto their mountaintop removal site. And they had big banners, they had their trucks, all that's really fun and cool if you're a kid. But Clear Fork Elementary is also within a mile of 3 mountaintop removal sites and a 4th one if Alpha gets their permit for that one. So, there's that support sometimes locally, but I think the people who are often opposed to it are intimidated, and either intimidated by violence or intimidated by opinions of somebody's cousin's nephew's brother-in-law who happens to work for the industry.
And coal supporters often claim that shutting down coal production will destroy communities that grew up around coal and the economies that support them. What do you all make of those claims?
I think if the coal industry brought prosperity and, economic vitality for southern West Virginia, we wouldn't be some of the poorest counties in the entire nation. And I think that's the only argument that needs to be made about that.
Right. Well, you all have mentioned Judy Bonds already, but she's such a big figure. She's the founder and director of Coal River Mountain Watch. She won the 2003 Goldman Environmental Prize. Known kind of her unofficial title is the godmother of the anti-mountaintop removal movement. I know you both knew her and worked with her. Can you tell me a little bit more about her and, just her personality and what role she played in bringing these issues to the national stage?
I first met Judy in 2004. I first heard her voice on the radio in 2003 after she won the Goldman Environmental Prize. She was not tall. What she lacked in stature, she made up with in heart and passion. She was brave. I mean, there's a story of her chasing a bear off because it was intimidating her dog. She used her grandson's track shoes to throw at the bear. She was from a coal mining family. I was one of the people who helped carry Judy's casket to her grave in her backyard. She was the last person out of Marford Holler and the community of Paxville that used to be there before the coal industry made it unbearable to live there. She cared deeply about her family. That's what got her into activism, seeing her grandson standing in a stream holding dead fish. I traveled some with Judy. She driving her car, you had to remove the pillow and scoot the seat back so that you could actually get behind the steering wheel. And she loved her community. She cared about her community, even the people that wished her ill. And one of my son's middle names is Jude, and that's for Judy. And she had such a huge impact on thousands and thousands of people that her shoes were hard to fill, and nobody's tried to fill them, and nobody can. But her loss from cancer from breathing mountaintop removal dust for all those years is a huge loss.
I was real lucky to know her when I was a kid. My mom actually volunteered with Coal River Mountain Watch in 1998, right after everything was started up. And I mean, she didn't do it for very long or anything, but I can remember going in there as a kid, and they had big pieces of butcher block paper essentially, like on an easel, and she'd let me draw on them and stuff. And it's one of the first places I would ever messed with a computer was at the old Coal River Mountain Watch office there. The one story that really sticks in my mind about Judy and me is, so when I was about 8 years old, this is around 98, there was a community meeting at the old Pettis School, which doesn't exist anymore. Now it's a parking lot for coal mines. And I went there. My mom brought me there when I was a little kid. And I remember standing up and asking Judy, if they want to blow up the mountains, why don't we all just hold hands around the mountains? And they can't. I was a little kid. And then years later, you fast forward, and I started working for Coal River Mountain Watch and all that. And there's this one point in time, Judy looks at me and she said, "Junior, do you know you're the first person to ever bring up direct action to me?" Referencing all the way back to that. Yeah. And that ain't something I talk about an awful lot because, I mean, that's kind of unbelievable. When I first started working for Mountain Watch and stuff, the actions and all that had been going on for quite a few years.
Really?
From when I was a teenager and stuff. And I wasn't involved in any of that. So it's crazy to think.
Wow, that's amazing. And Judy's known for doing this nonviolent direct action. And at this point, I know you all are doing a lot of monitoring work on foot with GPS and with small planes and drones. Can you talk about the various strategies that Coal River Mountain Watch uses and how they relate to the work the organization has done historically?
Yeah, that's you pretty well hit the nail on the head there as far as like our current strategy, which is the monitoring work. Either going up in flights with one of our partner organizations, South Wings, in small aircraft to kind of monitor these mines, or with drones, or on foot and just hiking around in the mountains and trying not to get seen by security guards. And yeah, I'd say over the years, Coal River Mountain Watch has employed a lot of different tactics, and we've had a lot of different campaigns to the ends of trying to be a nemesis to the coal industry. That's always kind of been our main goal, is to be as much of a pain to the coal industry as humanly possible. And so whatever projects we can figure out to work on to meet that goal, that's what we do. And over the years, we've done everything from lobbying in the state capitol in Charleston in Washington, D.C., gathering scientific data from lawsuits, traveling around and telling the story of how coal mining has affected our community at various, universities or events and things like that, to doing, direct action work, getting arrested, doing tree sits, and blockades, and things of that nature.
And what has changed? I know you were doing more direct action before. What has changed? Is the political environment changed? Has it? Do you feel like other tactics are more successful now? What's kind of the thinking there about the shifts in emphasis?
A lot of the emphasis, the shift in emphasis, is the myth that the coal industry is over. I mean, in 2015, it was in pretty much every major media outlet that King Coal was dead, when Alpha Natural Resources at the time requested bankruptcy relief. That was taken as a sign that it was over. And we had allies who said it was essentially over. That's the quotation from their fundraising letter. And some of the minor victories, I call them minor victories, in lawsuits, were overhyped, I think. So a lot of the energy from direct action campaigns went to other related issues, pipelines, fracking, and things like that.
And Junior, you went to Marsh Fork Elementary School. What was it like, one, to be there? Like, what did you notice about going to school there? And then secondly, what was it like to then witness this fight as you got older and became an adult, and then started working with Coal River Mountain Watch that was doing all this work, and with Judy, around relocation?
Right. Yeah. So I went to Marsh Fork Elementary from kindergarten through sixth grade, and that would have been from '95 until 2001. Uh, and yeah, no, I can remember dust in the playground, just like when you'd be let out for recess. Like if you was the first one over to the slides and stuff, there'd be a layer of dust just laying on everything.
And that was silica dust?
It was coal dust.
It was coal dust.
From the processing plant, yeah.
But that would, the ultrafine silica, that would be more in the air then?
It would be, and that's more from
That's from the mountaintop
blasting.
removal.
Yeah, exactly. Which there is a mountaintop removal site directly behind the processing plant beside the old school, but it wasn't active yet at the time I went there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So this was just straight coal dust.
Yeah, it was just coal dust. So it got worse after I left, essentially. And I do remember the first silo that they built there right directly behind the school. It's the only one that they actually built, but it was there when I was a kid. And I can remember the noise of them loading train cars. So imagine, a train pulling through a tunnel in the bottom of a massive silo, and then just like a bunch of coal dropping into each one of those cars every few seconds. I mean, it was difficult to concentrate on anything.
Well, I'm sure that Joe Manchin's kids had to deal with the same stuff in their school. What do you think?
Guarantee you that. About the, is that his daughter's the one that hiked up the price of EpiPens a while back? Yeah, no, I bet she's breathed all kind of coal dust in her life, huh? So from the time I got out of elementary school until I graduated high school, there was 2 kids that I went to elementary school with that had cancer, by the time we graduated high school. And yeah, one of them passed away. And then I've had other people that I went to elementary school with who since then until now have passed away. And I don't even know how many, but more than a couple. There was a girl that was in my grade that just died, I think, last year.
Whoa.
From cancer. And I solidly blame the coal operations that we were going to school next to.
Wow. And what's it like to see the school moved later and then to begin working for the organization that was responsible for that?
To know that the kids that would be going to school there now have a safe, clean school that they can go to just a few miles up the road from that one. It's amazing. I mean, that to me, I mean, even though I was only involved a little bit right at the very end, that's still one of the proudest things I've ever been involved in my life.
Well, it just makes it so much more powerful having gone to that school yourself. That's really an incredible story.
Yeah, I guess the sad thing is the new school is 2 miles from the Eagle 2 Mountaintop removal permit. So when they get around to that portion of it, those kids are going to be endangered from that too if the wind's blowing from the correct direction.
Right. And, I think when people think of coal mining, they think of that, you dig a tunnel in the mountain and you go down there and the coal is there and you knock it off and you put it in rail cars and you send it out. Can you talk just a bit more about why they're doing this mountaintop removal? I know you mentioned it's cheap, but why is it cheap? And why are they having to go for these thin sections of coal in the mountain now?
It's cheaper because it takes fewer people. If you go and watch a mountaintop removal site, you may see just a handful of people. There will be a guy driving that truck, a guy driving that truck, a guy driving that bulldozer, a guy driving that bulldozer, a security guy, and a few people operating the explosives. So, the energy and work that used to be done by miners is now done by explosives. And, the explosive equivalent of 20 Tomahawk missiles is, pretty substantial, even though the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection calls that a small blast. It does a lot of damage and it breaks up the rock, and then you just scoop it up, push it down the valley, or push it onto another section of the mountaintop removal site, and then scoop up the coal. It's fast and efficient. It's the low hanging fruit of getting to the coal. And if they want to come back later, they just spray some of this grass seed and fertilizer over it and call it good until they want to come back to it. The companies get a variance. They have all these variances, all these regulations and laws that they get the approval to violate, essentially, and they're not able to comply with the regulations. They can't even maintain a ditch. Right now, they have a very bad open violation on Coal River Mountain because their ditch failed. The ditch that's supposed to catch the runoff and the sediment, and it's just too steep and too. The laws of physics still apply in West Virginia, regardless of what the coal industry and the DEP think.
And what's the danger of company abandonment and bankruptcies and all of that, thinking about these issues?
A lot of the companies had what was called self-bonding, where they themselves guaranteed the money to fix up any reclamation if they were to abandon it. And that's not a good idea. But and there are also other companies that insurance companies or what have you, that a company can get their reclamation bond through. But so much of mountaintop removal is subject to failure, with too many bankruptcies or too many companies abandoning their obligations, that there is a real potential that the actual cleanup costs could fall on the taxpayer. And frankly, West Virginia taxpayers can't afford it. The state budget already gives more to the coal industry than they get from it.
Well, in the context of all this, Judy Bonds had to deal with continual threats of violence toward her, as have so many other people who've worked to stop mountaintop removal, like Larry Gibson, well-known activist who was working right near there. How much do you still encounter violence or threats of violence in this work?
I'll say when I first come on staff at Coal River Mountain Watch in 2010, before Judy would start her car, she'd have me go around and look at the underside of it with a mirror to make sure that there wasn't nothing going to surprise her when she started her car. And I think that since then, between the coal industry, just generally not employing as many people as they did in 2010, as well as the kind of shift of attitude of a lot of the local people after the Upper Big Branch mine explosion, and the kind of drop off of attention from the national news media about surface mining here in West Virginia as an issue. Also, something that's went away with all that has been a lot of the real visceral threats of violence and stuff from the other side, from the coal industry supporters. And that's not to say that it don't still happen, because it most certainly does. And, I'm real careful anytime I leave the house, that just to remember that there are people around here that would rather see me dead. But that in recent years, it hasn't been as bad as what it was at the height of the resistance to surface mining here.
And how about you, Vernon? What have you seen?
Back in 2009, in June of 2009, when we had the big rally at Marsh Fork Elementary School and the protest and the march down to the preparation plant, pretty much everybody had their lives threatened then. My life was threatened. My wife's life was threatened. Judy Bonds was sucker punched. That's, that it leaves an impression that, regardless of where you are, am I safe here? When is it coming? Or you're always looking over your shoulder. And, some people get treated for post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, when that trauma and that stress is ongoing, there's that concern, that anxiety that it could happen, and there's also the concern and anxiety for
right,
ongoing mountaintop removal. It's a violent process. It kills people.
Well, what is y'all's vision of what a future Raleigh County or a future West Virginia could look like, and how the communities there could find themselves in a much better place than what they have to endure currently?
I do not care. It's not my problem what the future is going to look like around here. It's not my problem how a coal miner is going to make their truck payment that they went out and financed some ridiculous big old truck. You know what I mean? That's not my responsibility to come up with what a future is going to look like here, just because I'm the one that's standing here saying that what's going on now is a problem and it needs to stop. That don't put the burden on my shoulders to tell these people what they're going to do next.
And Junior, is there a world that you want to live in there? Well, like, for example, I mean, do you imagine, hope for, dream of, a world without the coal industry operating? Or like, do you have a vision of just not to speak for everybody there or the coal miners or anything like that, but for yourself? Like, what would you like to see there that would be better for you?
The only thing I could see to make this area a better and more livable place is to do away with the coal industry. To stop them from operating completely, like 10 years ago.
Right.
And we haven't done that. They still get to do what they want, and it still makes this place miserable to live for most people, or for a whole lot of people. And yeah, I would love to see what this area would look like without the exploitation of the coal industry. I'm sure we would be just fine. The vast majority of the people that live in these communities around here are all retired or disabled. The coal industry dissolving overnight isn't going to affect them. It's going to affect the people, like I said, driving in an hour every day, and whatever happens to them and their cul-de-sacs and gated communities, I could care less.
Right. And why have you stayed?
Well, I stayed here because this is where my family is. Like I was talking about, I've traveled all over the country. I've been to almost every single one of the lower 48. And I've never found anywhere else that I'd rather live. This is a beautiful place. I'm lucky to be from here.
What keeps you going through this difficult work?
Well, for me personally, I'll say that I still feel like I owe it to the people who took me under their wings when I was first starting out in this stuff. Judy Bonds and Larry Gibson, Chuck Nelson, Sid Moy. There's many people that really kind of put a lot of faith into me and put a lot of effort into molding me into who I am today. And I'll be eternally grateful for that. And I still owe it to them and to their memories to keep doing this work until it's done, until there is no more coal industry in southern West Virginia, because that's what they asked of me. And so that's what I'm going to keep doing. And then on top of all that, just you can't live around here and see the way that people are exploited and the things that they're expected to live through and live with and be okay with and not stand up and say something about it. If you can sit there on your hands and keep your mouth shut just to protect your paycheck from seeing some of the things I've seen, then you're not a good person. And I try to be a good person.
The persistence, I think, is something that Colorado Mountain Watch is known for. I mean, since we started so long ago, we tend to be stubborn and we tend to be bulldogs in the sense of hanging on and sticking to it. I think our passion is seeing it through and not walking away from it, and that's something we do for the love of friends and family that aren't able maybe to take that stand, or who would like to, but for whatever reason are intimidated by the threats of violence. But when you have family members who have died from it and you see it, or you stand in it, or you breathe it, or you feel the dust in your teeth, it's gritty. You become a part of it, and it's more infused into you. And it's very much a battle, not just for the community, but for the sake of the planet. I mean, what happens in West Virginia affects people in the low-lying islands in the Pacific. It affects people impacted by hurricanes.
Yeah, and you kind of hinted at this idea earlier of, if we can't stop mountaintop removal, what hope do we have of dealing with these big global issues of climate change? It's it feels like such low-hanging fruit and so obvious that, if you're gonna start somewhere, let's start with that.
Exactly. There's no better low-hanging fruit in the climate crisis battle than
Right.
mountaintop removal.
Not only do we not need coal anymore, but we don't need to destroy mountains to get to it.
Yeah, we don't need to destroy mountains and kill people uh, to profit a few coal barons who control the state legislatures and much of the government itself. That wealth has power, and the people who breathe air and drink water have very little power in comparison. But eventually, there are more of us than there are of them, and we'll eventually outlast them. We've gone through how many iterations of alpha natural resources, alpha metallurgical resources, and whatever company name they're going to pick next year, that will eventually wait them out.
Well, what do you all hope that listeners can take from this conversation and your stories, and how can they get involved and support some of the work that you're doing at Coal River Mountain Watch?
If there's some big problem in your community that you feel passionate about, like, do something about it. First and foremost, that's, do whatever you can. Devote your life to it. But don't just let injustice stand. Because when you're quiet about it, everybody else is going to be too. It only takes one person to stand up and raise hell about it for other people to get brave. And then the second part that I'd like for people to take away from this is that these issues that we deal with down here in southern West Virginia related to the coal industry, they're just one issue in a sea of similar problems that goes on around this nation and around the world when poor people get exploited by wealthy people. And that's really the root issue that we're dealing with here, is the exploitation of this land and the people who live on it by wealthy interests that live elsewhere. And that, this issue here, it's not the capitalist system that we live under, gone wrong by any means. It's the capitalist system that we live under going directly 100% according to plan. This is their plan. We live on a planet of, only a set amount of resources. And the capitalist system that we live in is based upon this concept of exponential growth of more and more and more and more, consume, 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 consume. And those two facts are going to eventually come to a head. There's both of those can't coexist. And that's what they're trying to make happen right now, globally. And that's not how that works.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Junior said about, tackling the challenges in your own backyard. There's something everywhere that people can be plugged into and have that local voice. If somebody wants to help, if they want to help our organization specifically, it's crmw.net. We're always underfunded. There's more work to do than we have time to do.
Junior, one more thing I wanted to ask you. Could you talk a little bit more about the drone work you've been doing, and more about what it is you're filming and what impacts either you're hoping it's going to have or that you actually seen it have already?
For sure. So I've been using drones to film and document these mine sites since about 2016. And generally the idea is you fly the drone, you find something that they shouldn't be doing or that's messed up on their site that they're going to have to fix. You take that information to the DEP, the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection, and then you make the coal company fix whatever it is that you found. And so Generally, the fines and stuff that they get are just a slap on the wrist. They're factored into the cost of doing business. But what really hurts them is when we find stuff that they then have to take workers and equipment away from actively mining coal to then go to a different section of the site and repair. And that's what really hurts them economically. And in our hope, that is what will make it less economically feasible for them to keep their operations open.
Great. And have you seen results from that?
To some extent, for sure. I mean, we've definitely had to force, or like we've been able to force coal companies to have to go back to sections of their site that they're pretty far away from, and like fix crumbling high walls, or dig stuff out of a sediment ditch. And I don't think I'm wrong in assuming that we've been able to cost them a pretty penny.
Well, Vernon Jr., thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for all this amazingly difficult but important and vital work that you're doing. Thank you for keeping at it.
Thank you, John, for providing us a platform to tell the story and let people know.
Yeah, I appreciate you. It was great talking to you.
Thank you so much to Vernon Haltom and Junior Walk. Go to our website at chrysalispodcast.org, where you can find out more about Coal River Mountain Watch and the legacy of Judy Bonds. Plus, see some of Junior's drone footage of recent mountaintop removal operations. This episode was researched by Lydia Montgomery and edited by Brody Muchler and Sophia Chang. Music is by Daniel Rodriguez Vivas. Mixing is by Juan Garcia. If you enjoyed my conversation with Vernon and Junior, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Contact me anytime at chrysalispodcast.org, where you can also support the project, subscribe to our newsletter, and join the conversation.